On Christmas, my sister, the one who always expected me to babysit, sat with her planner and said, "You'll watch the kids for a week while we cruise." I said no. The next day, they showed up with luggage. But when they saw the note, their faces turned pale. But the real surprise was still to come. My name is Daniel. I'm 28, and if you asked my family, I was always the quiet one. The one who never caused trouble but also never stood out. Growing up, my older sister, Michelle, was the one who got all the attention. She was the perfect child, the one who always did everything right. Me? I was the one in the background, the one who didn't mind not being noticed. I never needed the spotlight, but I also never got the praise. And even though I got good grades, landed a decent job, and managed my life fairly well, Michelle's life was always more glamorous. She had the house, the kids, the family vacation pictures, the well-paid job. I lived in a small apartment with a pile of student loans, driving an old car that barely ran. Christmas was never a big deal for me. Sure, we'd get together, have dinner, exchange presents, and pretend everything was fine, but I never expected much from it. It was just another day. But this year was different. This year, everything shifted. I was sitting at home, enjoying a rare moment of peace, when my phone buzzed. It was Michelle, texting me like she always did around the holidays. "Hey, Daniel, can you watch the kids for a week while we take a cruise? We've been planning this for months. You'll be fine, right?" I stared at the message for a long time. Michelle had always expected me to babysit. Every time she needed a break, I was the go-to guy. But this? A full week? I didn't have the luxury of time to just drop everything. I had my own life to manage. So I did what I never did before. I said no. I was surprised at how easy it was. The words felt like a weight lifted off my chest. I sent the text and then set my phone down, thinking that was the end of it. But the next day, my doorbell rang. There they were, Michelle and her husband, Mark, standing at my door with their luggage, looking like they'd just walked off a cruise ship. Michelle held up a suitcase and smiled brightly. "We didn't get your message. We're heading out today," she said cheerfully. I looked at them both. "I said no, Michelle," I replied, my voice steady but firm. "I'm not watching the kids this time." Her smile faltered for a second, but she quickly masked it with a look of disbelief. Mark stood silently behind her, as if he was already regretting this decision. I could tell he didn't want to be involved. Michelle glanced at me and then at the luggage, a flicker of panic crossing her face. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." She looked back at Mark, and the color drained from her face. The tension between us was thick, and I could see her trying to figure out how to respond. She clearly didn't expect this. But then she just nodded, almost as if she had accepted defeat. "Well, that's your choice," she said, voice a little too calm. "But we're still going. Have a good holiday, Daniel." I watched as they turned to leave, their luggage dragging behind them. I closed the door with a quiet sigh, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. I wasn't sure why I felt so tense. Maybe it was because I'd finally set a boundary. Maybe it was because I knew they wouldn't take this well. And then it happened. The next morning, I woke up to a note taped to my door. A simple message from Michelle. "You'll regret this. We'll see how you handle things when you don't have the family to fall back on." I didn't know what to make of it, but I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. Growing up, I never really understood what it meant to be family. The way Michelle and I were treated was always worlds apart. Our parents, especially Mom, always made it clear who was the favorite. Michelle was the shining star, the one who always got the attention. I was the sidekick, the background character in my own life. It wasn't just about the achievements. It was about the way things were noticed or ignored. If Michelle got a perfect score on a test, she'd get praise and a new phone. If I did the same, it was "good job, but you should have aimed higher." It was subtle, but it stung every time. After years of being overlooked, I figured I wasn't worth the effort. I worked hard, did well in school, got into a decent college, and landed a stable job. Yet, nothing ever seemed enough. Michelle, on the other hand, had it all handed to her. She was the one who went on vacations, had her own house, and lived the life that everyone admired. She always had a perfect family, a perfect marriage, and even when things didn't go well, it was always someone else's fault. Over the years, I did what I had to do to survive. I buried my frustration and played along, going to the family dinners, helping with her kids when she asked, and pretending like I was okay being invisible. But the truth was, I was tired. Tired of being the one who always gave in, who always said yes, even when it meant sacrificing my own life. That's when it started, the small things that built up over time. Michelle would ask me to watch the kids for a weekend, no problem. But when it turned into a week, a cruise, that was too much. She wasn't asking anymore. She was telling. The reality hit me. Michelle had come to expect me to just be there whenever she needed, without so much as a thank you. She never seemed to consider that I had my own plans, my own life, my own boundaries. The worst part? When she'd get mad at me for saying no, it was like I was letting her down, not the other way around. She'd call me selfish, and I'd feel the sting of guilt. But that morning, when I got the note from her after they left, it hit me. She didn't care. She was more upset about the inconvenience than my feelings. And it wasn't the first time. Every time I tried to assert myself, it was as if I had done something wrong. I remember one holiday, years ago, when I was finally able to take a few days off work. I was looking forward to spending time by myself, just catching up on things, but Michelle called. She needed me to watch the kids for a day while she and Mark went to a wedding. I said no. I hadn't had a break in months, and I was tired. She told me I was being selfish and guilt tripped me into helping. That day I spent most of my time staring at the clock, waiting for it to end. I kept wondering why it was always me, why I was always the one who had to bend. And now, after all these years of giving in, after all the times I said yes, Michelle's response to my simple no was a note with words that cut deeper than anything she'd ever said. You'll regret this. What did she mean by that? Regret saying no? Regret standing up for myself? A few hours after the note, I got another text from Michelle, this time with a photo of her smiling, holding a cocktail by the pool on the cruise. She'd gone on the trip as if everything was normal. She never acknowledged the fact that I wasn't babysitting for her. It was as if my feelings didn't matter at all. And that's when I realized the depth of the problem. She didn't see me. Not as an individual, not as a person with a life outside of her own needs. To her, I was just an extension of her convenience. The anger inside me bubbled up, but I kept it in. I didn't respond to her texts or calls. I didn't want to be part of the drama, didn't want to fall into the old pattern of guilt tripping and manipulation. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I'd been compromising for her. How much I'd been letting my family take advantage of me without ever asking for anything in return. But as the days went on, the weight of the note still lingered in my mind. Regret. It was a word that echoed in my thoughts. I was tired of regretting everything. I regretted not speaking up sooner, not setting boundaries earlier. But this time I was done. And then, just as I thought it couldn't get worse, I found out something that took the entire situation to a whole new level. It was 3 days after Michelle and Mark left for their cruise that things took a drastic turn. I hadn't heard much from them except the occasional message from Michelle, still asking me to check on the kids or make sure they're doing okay. It was as if I were supposed to be their personal assistant while they enjoyed a tropical vacation. At first, I ignored the texts. But then came the phone call that changed everything. I was at work, scrolling through emails when my phone buzzed. It was Michelle. I let it ring a couple of times, figuring it was just another one of her routine check-ins. But when the phone buzzed again, something inside me told me to answer. Daniel, why aren't you helping out more? Michelle's voice was sharp, annoyed, and somehow casual at the same time. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I had no idea where this was headed. The kids are a mess, Daniel. I know I asked you to just keep an eye on them, but you're not even responding to me. They're going crazy over here, she snapped. I could hear the sound of the cruise ship in the background, the music, the chatter of other vacationers. There was a faint clinking of glass, and she sounded more concerned about her vacation than the kids' behavior. Michelle, I'm not there to babysit. I told you I wasn't going to do this. You've got to figure this out yourself, I said, feeling frustration rise in me. It felt like every word I said was like a slap in the face to her, but I wasn't backing down. God, you're being difficult, she muttered, the words heavy with a tone I knew too well. I'm really starting to regret you not helping. This is the last time I'll ask you for anything. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to manipulate me, playing the victim, making me feel guilty for not doing something I had every right to refuse. That's fine, Michelle. I don't regret it, I said, my voice cold, sharper than I intended. There was a silence on the other end, and for a moment, I thought maybe she was processing what I said. But then she dropped the bombshell. You know, Mom thinks you've been a disappointment lately. I told her you were acting weird and distant. and she said, "Well, Daniel's always been like that." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The one person who had always been on Michelle's side, who always saw me as the problem child, was now apparently echoing her words. I hadn't spoken to Mom in weeks. I'd cut off contact with her because I couldn't deal with the constant judgment, the expectation that I would just fit into whatever mold she'd made for me. But hearing that Michelle was using Mom's voice to guilt trip me, that was the final straw. "You've been telling Mom everything, haven't you?" I spat, my voice trembling with anger. "You've been twisting everything around, making me the bad guy. You've been telling her I'm the problem, haven't you?" "I haven't been telling her anything, Daniel. But you've been so distant lately. What do you want me to do?" "Everyone's worried about you," she shot back, her voice suddenly defensive. "You're ruining everything, making this all about you." My heart raced. The betrayal stung more than I could describe. It wasn't enough that she was manipulating me into helping, but now she was turning the family against me. I wanted to scream, but I kept my composure. "I'm done, Michelle. This is it. I'm not going to be your fallback anymore. And I'm not going to let you use Mom to make me feel guilty. You're on your own." The line went quiet. I waited, heart pounding, listening to the faint background noise of her vacation. I imagined her standing there, staring at the phone, processing what I had said. Finally, she spoke. "You're making a huge mistake, Daniel. You'll regret this. I'm telling you, this is the last time I'm ever asking for help." I didn't respond. I just hung up. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. I wasn't trapped in the web of guilt she'd been weaving around me for years. I didn't have to play the role of the dependable, invisible sibling anymore. But at the same time, I knew the consequences were going to come. Michelle wouldn't let this go. She never did. That evening, I sat on my couch, staring at the phone. It had been hours since our conversation, and part of me was still waiting for her to reach out again. But the phone stayed silent. I couldn't help but wonder if she had really been planning to go through with her threats. Would she turn the family against me? Would they side with her? The answer came the next day, but it wasn't the way I expected. I got an email from my mother. It was short, simple, and to the point. "You need to fix this, Daniel. Michelle is upset, and now the family's upset. You don't want to make this a bigger issue. Please, don't be difficult. This is what family is for." I stared at the screen. I knew what this meant. Michelle had gone straight to Mom, twisted the story, and now I was the one at fault. Again, that's when it hit me. I wasn't just fighting for my time, my space, my boundaries anymore. I was fighting to be seen as an equal, to not be the one who always got blamed. And as I sat there, reading my mother's email, I realized that the moment I stood up for myself, when I said no, I had crossed a line. I wasn't just challenging Michelle anymore. I was challenging the expectations of my entire family. But even though I knew this battle wasn't over, I felt a small sense of triumph. For once, I wasn't playing the role I had been assigned. I was doing what I needed for myself. The next few days passed in a blur. I couldn't escape the feeling that something was about to explode. I had made my stand. I had set my boundaries. But that didn't mean it was over. Michelle wasn't going to let this slide. She'd never been one to back down when she didn't get her way. I spent the next few days at work, trying to keep my mind occupied. I buried myself in projects, avoiding calls and texts from Michelle, my mother, and anyone else who might try to guilt trip me into backing down. But then came the phone call that sealed it. It was late on a Friday evening, and I was just finishing up a report when my phone buzzed. I checked it, expecting it to be spam or maybe a random work-related message. Instead, it was a call from my dad. I hadn't spoken to him in a while. We'd never been close, but I knew this wasn't a casual check-in. The tension in my chest grew as I answered. "Daniel." My dad's voice was tight, almost uncomfortable. "We need to talk." I sighed, feeling the weight of the conversation before it had even begun. "What's going on, Dad?" "You know what's going on," he said, a hint of frustration creeping into his tone. "Your mom's upset. Michelle's upset. We're all upset. What the hell happened, Daniel?" I could hear the disappointment in his voice. It stung more than I cared to admit. I'd always been the one to avoid conflict, the one who went along with whatever the family expected. But now, I had drawn a line, and they were making it clear they didn't like it. I said, "No, Dad. That's what happened. I'm not dropping everything to take care of Michelle's kids while she's on vacation. I have my own life." "You don't understand," he snapped. "This isn't just about the kids. It's about family. You're being selfish." The word hit like a slap. Selfish? I echoed, my voice trembling with the anger that had been building for days. You know what's selfish? Expecting me to keep sacrificing my life for everyone else, never once considering what I need. You all made me feel like I don't matter. And now I'm the one who's selfish. There was a long pause on the other end. I could feel the weight of the silence. Finally, Dad spoke, but his words were heavy with resignation. You know, Michelle and your mom are right. You've always been difficult. Maybe that's why you're always so distant. You've got to learn how to be part of this family. You can't just keep walking away every time things don't go your way. The words stung, but they didn't hurt as much as I thought they would. In that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding for years. They weren't going to change. My family was never going to see me the way I wanted to be seen. I wasn't going to get the recognition I deserved. They would always see me as the outcast, the disappointment, the one who didn't play by their rules. I'm not walking away, I said quietly, feeling a strange sense of peace. I'm just not going to be used anymore. There was another pause, longer this time, and I could hear my dad exhale sharply. I don't know if you'll ever understand this, Daniel, but family helps family. You should know that. I know, Dad, but family doesn't just take. It gives too. And I've been giving for years, I said, my voice soft but firm. I guess we'll see if you can live with your decision. He replied, his tone cold, final. Good night. I hung up without responding. A knot had formed in my stomach, but it wasn't because of guilt. It was because I knew I had made the right choice. I had finally taken control of my life. I had finally stood up for myself, and I wasn't going back. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Michelle. It was short, sharp, and completely devoid of any attempt at reconciliation. Enjoy your holidays, Daniel. This is the last time I'll ever ask you for anything. I'm done. I stared at the screen for a moment, then closed the email without replying. I wasn't going to beg for her approval. I wasn't going to apologize for protecting my boundaries. It was clear she wasn't looking for an apology anyway. She was looking for someone to blame. That evening, my mom called. She didn't even bother with pleasantries. She went straight into it. I can't believe you've done this, Daniel. You've broken your sister's heart, and now you're breaking mine. Do you realize how hard this is for everyone? I didn't break anyone's heart, Mom, I said, my voice calm but resolute. You all just don't like that I said no. And you know what? I don't regret it. You'll regret this, she said, her voice shaking slightly. You'll regret pushing us away. You always do this. Every time things get hard, you walk away. No, Mom. I'm not walking away. I'm standing up for myself. And for once, I'm not going to feel guilty about it. There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end, but she didn't speak. Finally, she sighed. Goodbye, Daniel, she said, and hung up. I stared at the phone for a few moments, processing the weight of it all. I was still shaking with adrenaline, but this time, it wasn't out of fear or anxiety. It was out of relief. I had said no. I had finally taken control of my life. And even though it felt like everything around me was crumbling, I knew deep down it was the right thing to do. I was done being the invisible one. Done being the backup plan. Done being the one who always had to clean up everyone else's mess. And maybe that was the hardest part. But it was also the most freeing. Weeks passed after that conversation, and life started to feel different. Not easy, not exactly peaceful, but real. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was living for someone else's expectations. Michelle didn't reach out, and neither did my parents. The silence was deafening at times, but I found a strange comfort in it. I could breathe without the weight of guilt or obligation hanging over me. I focused on my work, on things that mattered to me. I spent time on hobbies I'd neglected, things like painting, reading, and even going on long walks without a care in the world. My apartment, which I'd once felt trapped in, became my sanctuary. It was mine. All of it was mine. The hours I'd spent away from my family, pouring into my career, had finally paid off. But even with that newfound peace, there were moments when the old wounds would resurface. The guilt, the doubts, the familiar voices from my past telling me I wasn't enough, that I was being selfish. I'd hear Michelle's voice echoing in my mind, saying I was difficult, cold, and that I'd regret standing up for myself. I'd hear my mom, too, telling me that family was everything. They made it sound like I was breaking something sacred, like my decision to put myself first was an unforgivable sin. One afternoon, I received a package. It was small, unassuming, and yet I knew exactly who it was from before I even opened it. It was from Michelle. Inside, there was a photo album. At first, I thought it was just a random collection of family pictures. But then I saw the note inside. It read, "You'll always be part of this family, Daniel. You just have to accept that we all have different ways of showing love." I sat there for a while, holding the album, the words hanging in the air. The photo album was filled with memories, some of me, most of Michelle's kids, pictures from family holidays and birthdays. It was a reminder of everything I had missed out on. It wasn't just about the kids, the vacations, or the big family moments. It was about how I had been erased from those memories, left behind because I didn't play the part they wanted me to. I could feel the old guilt creeping in. The weight of the past, the nagging voice that always told me to give in, to be the one who fixed everything. But as I looked at the pictures, something shifted inside me. It wasn't just about saying no anymore. It was about realizing that I wasn't wrong for standing up for myself. I wasn't wrong for putting my needs first. So, I closed the album and put it back in the box. I didn't need it. I didn't need them to validate me anymore. I had already made peace with my decision. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and thought about everything that had happened. It was strange, but I felt free. Free from the burden of expectation. Free from the guilt. I wasn't the one who needed to apologize. I wasn't the one who had done something wrong. I finally understood something I'd spent my entire life not fully grasping. Boundaries weren't about shutting people out. They were about protecting myself from being used. They were about knowing when enough was enough, when to say no, and when to walk away. And no matter how many times Michelle or my parents tried to make me feel like I was the villain, I knew the truth now. I wasn't the problem. I had just been the one willing to bend until I broke.